So, Keir, aka Blockchain Gandalf, you are a blockchain researcher. You're a
Hmm.
software engineer, inventor. You mentioned that it's about over 40 patents
Hmm.
to your name, and you also author of Move Over Brokers. Here comes the blockchain book, which like covers the overall
That's the book.
topic. The overall topic of the blockchain with like blockchain for dummies, let's say it this way, like as easy
Hmm.
understandable as possible. So tell us about yourself, about your journey a bit. What sparked your interest in technology in the first place? Because it's like it's a huge journey. Yeah, I would love to hear more about
Okay.
your journey.
Well, first, I am going to correct you. It's not like blockchain for dummies because I don't think my audience are dummies. All right.
Oh no,
I just think
no, no,
that
no. All right.
I've always found that series of books. I mean, I know it's kind of tongue in cheek, but I think
Yeah,
you shouldn't underestimate the intelligence of your audience. Maybe the knowledge base isn't there, but that doesn't mean that people aren't smart. We've got where we are. Yeah.
no, for sure, for
So
sure.
I'm
I
not.
mean, I read tons of dummies book
Right.
even
Yeah. Yeah.
now.
I'm not.
If you have that if you have that
Mm,
inner passion, like as one of my mentors told me back in the time, you should always act like a dummy if you want to earn more
mm.
knowledge, to get more knowledge. So it's like a privilege to have this understanding that despite all your knowledge, you don't know
Oh yeah,
everything
and the
in the
more
world.
you
So you should have
right.
this inner
Yeah,
passion
and the
to
more you
learn
learn, the more
more.
you discover there is to learn. That's the
For sure.
so.
It's good to be a dummy.
Well, I think it's good to be humble, right? It's good to not think
For
and I think
sure.
that's different from being a dummy. Um, that realizing that it's a big world, there's an awful lot of knowledge out there. There's an awful lot of difficult stuff to try to understand, and uh, good teachers appreciate that. I was fortunate enough to be a mathematics lecturer at South Bank University in London for a couple of years,
Wow.
uh, lecturing the computer science students, and that was really useful when you actually get to talk to the undergraduates and understand what it is that they're finding difficult. And plus,
Mhm.
I studied mathematics at Cambridge, and before I went there, I thought I was really smart. I was like one of the brightest ones my school had seen for a long time. Then I went there and discovered that I was somewhere between average and below average.
Right. Can you hear me now? Oh gosh. And
Is this something
no, no,
common, like all this
no. It's
power cut?
the weather in Finland has been really unusual the last 4 years or so. So we had a winter 4 years ago with no snow, which the last time that happened was like 1912. And the
Oh
summers
wow.
are typically 5 degrees hotter than they used to be, and we're getting a lot more thunderstorms. So yeah, it's and then if it's not
Wow.
amazingly warm in the winter, then like this winter we had 12 days or yeah 12 days with it below -20, and normally the kind of -20 to -40 is like 2-3 days. So the houses were suffering because they're not built to cope with um, that level
Hmm.
of oh, I've got the wrong mic on here, by the way. Here, is that better? Can you still hear me? Okay, good. And my sound's
Yes,
better as well now as well.
perfectly.
Um,
Like I'm now based in Dubai. It's about 51, 52 degrees.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's really crazy. And the humidity is about 75.4% at least.
Oh, I hate that. When I was in Chennai in India years ago,
Yeah.
and walking out the air-conditioned hotel, it's like walking into a bowl of soup. It's just ugh. And you can't sweat
Yeah, I
properly.
feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel
It's,
that. It's not
anyway,
fun.
but we're not here to discuss climate change.
For sure. We're here for bigger things.
Well, It's all tied together. But okay, good.
Yeah.
Let's hope that doesn't happen again. And I hope I can get that other drive fixed. Or if I can't, I hope I've got decent backups.
Well, let's pray for that. Let's pray for that for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
We're talking about your journey.
Right. Yes.
Uh, yeah.
And I think I was just mentioning how I used to lecture maths at South Bank University in London,
Yes.
and
Yes.
how Cambridge was a good experience because it taught me the lesson I needed when I was 18, that I wasn't nearly as smart as I thought I was. So, because it's very easy to think that something that you grasp quickly is something that other people should be able to understand too. And similarly, if you've always found it really easy to learn stuff, when you hit the first obstacle where you can't learn it immediately, it's very easy to give up. So I think having that experience at a younger age of hitting stuff that just wasn't easy and intuitive anymore was really fortunate. Because if it had happened when I was 30, then I think I might have given up on an awful lot of stuff that I've actually stuck with. So yeah, so that's the foundations, and of course, really useful foundations for blockchain, having all the mathematical background,
Yeah,
because
for sure.
it's like blockchain is kind of, if you go into technically, it's all good until you hit the maths, and then for a lot of people who are even if they're developers and they're really good at coding, they just when you hit the cryptography side of things, you can get very quickly end up in some pretty hideously complicated mathematics. So,
Indeed. I
mhm,
feel that.
yeah,
I feel it on my own skin a couple of times.
right,
I
yeah,
know exactly what you're talking
yeah,
about.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then I was a tech writer. That was my sort of start in the computer industry. It's Even though it was the mid '90s, it was quite hard to break into, because at that point they were hiring people with computer science degrees, because it was a new industry, and the employers hadn't kind of worked out that you don't need to have a computer science degree. There are other degrees or even other backgrounds that you can have that qualify you for it. And I'd been programming as a hobby since the '80s as a kid on my ZX
Wow.
Spectrum with a rubber keyboard. Um, so, but 2 years tech writing was really good, because it gave me a grounding in trying to write stuff in a clear, communicative way. And then I went on to test engineering, because I'd had a history of breaking things. Um, and even in maths, I tended to be better at finding counterexamples to people's hypotheses than finding proofs for them. So, and yeah, I jumped from all sorts of things: security testing, databases, 3D modeling, in like these CAD/CAM libraries, and then most recently it was satellite navigation. So that's writing or testing software that gets the signals from the satellites and works out where you are and decodes the signals. And as part of that job in 2010, somebody said, "Hey, you should read this. This looks like it'd be right up your street." And it was the Nakamoto paper, Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer. I should know that off by heart, shouldn't I? A digital cash. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
I can see the title, but I can't say it. But yeah, and I thought it was really interesting. Combined all sorts of things that I was interested in: cryptography, peer-to-peer networks. Money wasn't something I was so interested in. So that's the area where I had to learn: is how does economics work? How does accounting work? How does money work? And the funny thing is that when I was at college, economics was presented as a science. And then when you go and study it, you realize it's actually more of a religion, that there's various schools of thought as to how economics works. And there are some underlying principles that are the same across the different branches. But when it comes to the way that we handle macroeconomics, as far as I can tell, nobody really has a clue. And yet we give out a Nobel Prize in it. It's and I'm not a hardline Austrian school of economics person or a Keynesian economist or anything like that. I just try to look at all the things and see, well, does that feel valid to me or does that not? Because I think economics is, because it involves so many people and so many different viewpoints and cultures and ways of looking at how society should work, I don't believe that there is one model underlying it that works for everything. And I think that's where they hit the problem. You know, if you've grown up in a very capitalist society, you're going to have these ingrained beliefs about life that are very capitalist in outlook. If you've grown up in a more socialist
Yes.
country, you're going to have a feeling that economics should be run along more socialist lines. So, for example, somebody in Finland finds it unbelievable that somebody in America could just be left to die because they don't have enough money for medical treatment, right? Whereas someone in
Mhm.
America thinks it's insane that a random person in Finland gets very expensive medical treatment paid for just by virtue of being a Finnish citizen. Why should the rest of the Finns be paying for that person when they don't even know them, when that person may not even be a particularly nice person? So you can't square these things, and that goes through to economics and the way that people view money and the purpose of money and how it should be generated, who should get it. All right.
All
So,
right.
but you do get these currents or streams where people occasionally kind of go, well, actually, we've had enough of being ruled by a king, or we've had enough of the factory owners controlling our lives and us basically being their robots. And then you get a kind of a revolution, and then a new thing comes along, and it's never perfect. But anyway, there you
Yeah.
go. I went straight from my background into into the thorny stuff you're not
Yeah,
supposed to
but
talk
it's
about at
good.
dinner. Yeah.
It's good. Yeah, yeah. It's a super interesting and impressive journey, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
And talking about the rebellion that
Hmm.
blockchain is kind of bringing into the table by this free and decentralized currencies,
Hmm.
etc., etc. At the same time, we know that there is a lack of security as always because again it's decentralized. So it gave people more pirates, hackers more access
Yeah, I
and
wouldn't say lack of
not increased the
security.
role
It's just an increase in responsibility, right?
for sure.
I
Right.
mean, it's kind of if you get rid of the police, you need better locks on your house, right? Um, which in some cases is a bad thing. You know, police have a valid role to play in society in protecting citizens. The problem comes
Mhm.
when a government turns its police force from a force for good to help the people in the society
Yeah.
and help the vulnerable into a private army where
Yes.
it's used to suppress sectors of society they don't like. I saw this as a student in the United Kingdom um, in the 70s, and the police had a good relationship with citizens on the whole. You know, there's this kind of, if you want to know the time, ask a policeman. In the 80s, Margaret Thatcher used the police force as riot control to quash protests that she didn't like. And you started getting this, and we had things like the miners' strike and stuff like that. And it
Mhm.
changed the role of the police in the public eye from being this, the helpful village bobby, to a kind of internal army being used by the government to suppress protest. Sometimes validly, because some of those protests were violent, but sometimes they overstepped the line, and you ended up with. Well, I can remember one where I was at a demo, and the police threw tear gas canisters at us as we were hemmed in at the northeast side of Hyde Park, and so some of the protesters were picking them up and throwing them back because we were all in a crowded area. And
Yeah.
then on the news, it was reported the protesters were throwing tear gas at the police. And you're kind of, hang on, that's like half the story. What's going on here? Right. So, so yes, I've digressed there into yet another political thing, but blockchain itself is secure. It's the stuff that we build on top of it and the stuff that we build to connect to it that's not.
It's not.
And
Yes.
as a result, we need to take a lot more care than unfortunately we have, coming from a history of computing being about moving quickly and breaking things, thanks to the social media platforms. And of
Sure.
course, they can just push stuff out. It's a web app, right? If they push out something bad on the web, well, you just re-release it with a fix. We've
Yep.
seen with CrowdStrike what happens, however, if you
Oh,
push
sure.
something out which hasn't been properly tested. And part of that is a legacy of bad architectural decisions being made rapidly with profit at the forefront rather than security. So I'll reiterate the core part. Bitcoin hasn't been hacked.
For sure. Yeah.
There was one incident where a guy found an overflow error where he could create quadrillions of bitcoins in a transaction, and they fixed that really fast. I think, God, that was was it 2010? It was really early on.
Yeah.
And I think that was the last time there was a hack. And then there was a bad fork in 2013 where an updated, I think it was version 0.8, was a hard fork, and the miners, lots of them hadn't moved from 0.7, and we had two very, very long forks that wouldn't reconcile. Since then, I think it's been 100% uptime.
Yeah. Bitcoin, yes.
Which, when you
However,
think about it, is absolutely remarkable. A network of computers running software of that complexity for so long, and it just keeps going.
and on the other hand, we see projects and other blockchains like Solana. I love the Solana community. It's not about it. They're very great, but like breaking every half a year or something.
Yeah, I keep getting asked, why don't you do anything on Solana? And it's just, to me, it's the yo-yo blockchain, right? It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. And I'm very conservative about the time that I spend on chains, because there are so many of them, and it's very easy to spend months and months and months and then find out that it's not going anywhere. And now we all have a limited amount of time.
For
And
sure.
so I don't want to be the early adopter. I really didn't get started on Ethereum until I think it was 2016. That's how long I
Okay.
waited on that. Bitcoin I didn't buy until 2013. I'd crawled through the source code and worked out how it all functioned, and I'd even started writing my own blockchain in Ruby, more as a learn Ruby exercise than and learn blockchain than thinking it would have any commercial value. But which by the way, not buying to 2013 felt like I really regretted it until recently. Now it doesn't matter whether it was 2010 or 2013, but at the time it kind of felt like I was late. And I've looked at things like Polkadot and Cardano, Avalanche. Those are the ones I probably spent the next most amount of time, but nothing significant, because I want to know it's going somewhere.
So you're concentrating mainly on Bitcoin.
Yeah, I'd say hours-wise, I probably spent more time on Bitcoin than anything else. But in the last 3-4 years, most of my effort's gone into Ethereum, rather Solidity programming.
Yes.
But the thing is that at some point, we're going to have a viable method for running smart contracts on Bitcoin. And there are already a bunch of projects out there that have brought EVMs, so that's Ethereum virtual machines, that are powered by gas that is paid for in Bitcoin. Some of them look better than others, but you can see that people are thinking about that concept. Can we somehow take the smart contract side of Ethereum and bring it over so that it can manipulate Bitcoin value? So I don't see that as working on Ethereum as a loss. But I do think Bitcoin is understandably very, very conservative. So it's kind of harder to innovate on, and that's a good thing, because there needs to be this one sort of backbone to it all,
Yeah.
where the
Agree.
value resides, and that is where the focus is on keeping it robust and everything is conservative. You don't want to be messing with something like that as though it's a toy.
Oh, for sure. This is something that you're doing at Chainfrog on daily basis at your company.
Well, my company started off in 2016 as a blockchain
Yes.
startup. And what you got to realize in 2016, 2017 was that people who had gone all in on blockchain often went to bed and then couldn't sleep because they were worried that they were going to wake up in the morning and find that it was all nonsense. And even people who felt passionate about the technology, I mean, I felt that it had this value inside it that we hadn't even started to unlock yet, and I was very passionate about it. But I was concerned that the rest of the world would go, nah. Like deciding that a VHS video recorder was better than a Betamax. My family had a Betamax video recorder. For people who don't remember video recorders, go and Google VHS versus Betamax. And I was just worried that blockchain might end up being that. And there were lots of other things to start looking at too at that point. And my startup had a product because I'd had this idea that it would be neat to have a connector between blockchains and databases. So you've got people are very familiar with SQL databases. People are not familiar with blockchains. Write a piece of middleware that allows developers to put data on the blockchain through an SQL interface, which is familiar, and use the blockchain for identity and access management, and our encryption scheme for encrypting any data that went on the blockchain and decrypting it and sharing keys and stuff like that. Couldn't get a single company interested in it. So I'll go along to companies, say, this is this product I have. I think you might find it interesting. Maybe we can look at use cases for you. I was naive in the startup world. I didn't even know what the difference between sales and marketing was back then. Right. I mean, I was one of these archetypal CEOs who came from technology and probably should have been a CTO.
I see.
What they did want was free blockchain education in sales meetings, and to get us to work on permissioned and private blockchains. So I wasted 2017, 2018 trying to work with companies to find, well, it wasn't a waste, but find use cases for blockchains that aren't public and permissionless. And I felt at the time, and I kept saying to people, I think the value really comes out of the fact that they're democratic, they're open, they're permissionless, they're not. Otherwise, why not just use a database? And it took, but it was useful because it allowed me to think of, well, why are these companies doing this? Why has all this work gone into Hyperledger? Why can the companies not see the value of an open permissionless blockchain? Of course, the answer is that's it harks back to what I was talking about, your sort of philosophical view on how society functions, right? Companies have a worldview that we've been constructing for them since the 70s or 80s. A company's about maximizing shareholder value. That's its core purpose. And they do that by trying to dominate markets and exclude others. And so they're not in the business of collaborating in the way that blockchain encourages collaboration. They see every collaborator as an eventual competitor. And there's the incentive isn't there. So getting a bunch of companies together and helping them set up a blockchain between them is it's not the way they work. They're not interested in building a bigger pie and taking the same percentage of the pie and therefore getting more. They're interested in the pie as it is, getting as much of that pie as they can. And that doesn't work in blockchain. It's counterproductive.
Human nature.
Yeah. So that was the big. And those were the days where when you went and gave a talk, everybody wanted you to explain the difference between a public and a private blockchain and a permissioned and a permissionless blockchain. I have an analogy in my book about that, which explains it. But it's not the relevant question that it was 8 years ago.
And right now, the Chainfrog is still active, right?
Yeah. So we've got a bunch of patents that were granted, and
Okay.
patents are, well, I think they're really only going to come into their value in about 5 years' time, because when you
All right.
And patenting's interesting. It's a way of providing incentivization for inventors to reveal what they've come up with to the world,
Hmm.
so the world can work on improving it, whilst giving the inventor some kind of reward for the fact that they came up with the idea in the first place. And it's not the world's best system, but I happen to believe it's the best one we have as an inventor, because otherwise, what's my motivation to be inventing? Where am I going
For
to,
sure.
and if I do invent something great, why would I reveal it? In fact, the patents are enshrined in the U.S. Constitution. The founding fathers of the U.S. consider them so important that they're actually there um, in the Constitution. Everyone goes on about the right to bear arms, but and that's an amendment. Patents are that was seen as that important, and there are like cases in the past where like a doctor invented something that meant that childbirth was a lot easier, and then he would only deliver with a shroud around him so nobody could see his invention of forceps, and pass them on from father to son. And think about the thousands, hundreds of thousands of childbirths that went wrong that might have been successful if only the world had known about that invention. But why is the doctor going to reveal it? That's his secret sauce. That's the thing that makes him um, able to
Earn
charge
his money.
aristocrats.
Yeah.
Yeah, go and charge the king and the aristocrats a fortune for delivering their babies, and tough
Yeah.
luck to the farmers and the others out there. So, but it does have its problems. So back to the patent thing. Yeah, the blockchain patents. I reckon in 5 to 10 years' time, that's when they will really be coming into their the space where they're valuable. When I first came up with the ideas, there wasn't anybody to sue for infringement, and I tried to um, build products based on the inventions. But as it turns out, I'm better at inventing than I am at productizing and selling the inventions. So
And how this thing is working? Like, imagine someone from somewhere have this crazy idea and they want to
mhm,
patent it. How the whole process of patenting working? If we're talking about the worldwide, right? So if you register your patents on Finland, and
mhm.
somehow I end up having the same idea on other country, how it should work? Like,
Well, for
whose words?
starters, patents have jurisdictions. So you get a patent in the US or China or India or in the European Union,
For
and then
sure.
you can either seek licensing deals with people who want to use your invention, or you can sue them for infringement and damages if they don't agree to a licensing deal in that jurisdiction. So if you only patent something in the United States and somebody in Europe uses your invention, then you can't get anything. The US patent's worthless. But what you have done is create a barrier for them operating in the United States. So if they are successful in Europe with your invention, then at some point, presumably, they're going to want to sell it in America. Then they have to come to the table and negotiate. So,
Yeah.
and they only last for 20 years. And unfortunately, they are very expensive to obtain. Patent lawyers are not cheap.
Mhm.
The process is fairly drawn out and technical. And then there are all these fees you have to pay afterwards as well. So I only managed it because I taught myself to write application drafts, and to go through the process with the U.S. Patent Office examiners to get the patent granted. Yeah, and it was a lot of work, but I found it really interesting. So, and saved myself probably $20,000 per patent that I get in the process. So,
Wow,
mm.
that's huge.
Mm.
And at the same time, you learn a lot of things, I guess,
Yeah, well,
when
it's
it comes
useful
to the
because
law
I didn't know
system.
much about law, and it's an interesting introduction to law because you come at it from an engineering side.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not a path I'd recommend to everyone, though. It's,
Not even the entrepreneurs and technical CEOs.
well, it took. I was lucky in a number of ways. Firstly, when I was my previous employer, they laid everybody off at the end of 2015, which is what kind of pushed me into entrepreneurship, and turned out to be the best thing in my life. So just because you lose your job in a 10% layoff exercise is not necessarily
Mhm.
going to be a bad thing. But they had a patent award scheme where if you provided them with an invention idea, they paid you $400, and then if they pursued a patent and it got granted, you got another $1,500. So it was good pocket money. And it meant that I was talking to their patent attorneys, and so I was having these meetings for an hour or two a week to discuss turning the invention into a patent application. And unusually, they said, and these patent attorneys are outside legal people brought in and paid by the hour to handle the patenting side of thing. They said that engineers normally don't ask about how the patent process and patent drafts and stuff. And I was asking, and then after the layoff, well, when it was announced, I thought, well, I better take advantage of this. So I submitted, I think, 100 invention ideas in 2 months, and they
Wow.
decided to pursue 12, but I wasn't an employee anymore, so they had to pay me for my time, and they had to pay me the award anyway. So I made quite a. Actually, no, they didn't pay me the awards after they laid me off, but they did for the 2-month period. So I made a good sum of money. And then when I was in the meetings after I was no longer an employee, I thought, well, I'm going to take advantage of this to get a free legal education. And of course, the lawyers, well, they're charging by the hour. So they're quite happy to spend 3 hours talking to an ex-employee about why they're writing the patent in this language and what these components mean and what future potential problems there are that they're overcoming by the way they're drafting all this stuff. So I got a fantastic free education, which, and I don't think many people get that opportunity. So I
Oh,
was lucky.
yeah. So right now, if I'm not mistaken, you wear multiple hats
Hmm.
as a board member at Helsinki Blockchain Center.
Right. Actually, I've just resigned from that one. it's I've been there for 3 years, and I decided enough is enough. Somebody else should have a turn. But yeah.
And what were you doing there as a board member?
Well, I mean, to be honest, a board member wasn't nearly as exciting as I thought it was going to be, because most of it is complying with companies law, right? So
Okay.
companies have a particular structure, so that has evolved over the years, but most countries now use roughly the same structure, which is you have shareholders, and they have the right to vote in or vote out a board, but they only get to exercise their vote once a year, unless it's a special occasion. Then you have a special thing, and then you have a board, and they are kind of like they sort of supervise the company, make sure that that it's got direction, that everything's going okay, and that you've got a good executive suite. You've got good CEO, CTO, CFO, people like that, and then you have the executive who actually do the day-to-day running of the company. And when you're a board member, most of what you're doing is reading financial reports and then signing off on it, saying yes, there's no embezzlement going on, the money's being spent sensibly, they're not blowing it all on um, stupidly expensive office furniture, and they're focusing on getting the job done. And then you have the discussions about the direction of the company. Is the executive vision pointing in the right direction? So it's kind of I guess when you look at it, where companies come from, often it was from things like exploring the South Seas. So you have a bunch of people, they're the shareholders, putting up money to buy a boat that's going to go and sail off to the South Seas and find gold or whatever, right? So the captain and the crew of the boat, that's the executive suite and the workers in the company. And then you have the people back at head office in London who are checking that it's all being done properly, that the money's going to the right place, you know, that's where I presume the structures evolved from. And sitting in head office in London, occasionally looking at the paperwork to make sure it's all going okay, turns out not to be as exciting as I hoped it would be. So
Yeah, but you still have two extra hats, right? You're still advisor for resonance security, right?
yeah, I help write social media articles for them to help them with
Yeah.
their kind of reach, because I think they're doing a great job at making computer security accessible, and they are in Web 2 and Web 3, which is rare because you have a lot of like Web 3 auditing companies and you have a lot of Web 2 security companies, but there aren't many that actually have the global picture. And because I helped the CEO as an advisor, mainly as somebody that can tell him the things that clearly don't work. Right? My advice is usually, yeah, I tried that, it doesn't work. Yeah, and I tried that too, it doesn't work. I'm not so good on the you should try this, that really does work. Um, but he seems to find it useful to have somebody he can bounce ideas off, and then I can
Yeah,
say, oh, that might work, and that definitely won't work. I've been there. So
I see.
yeah.
It's very interesting.
Mm.
Your role, just be there whenever they need you and share your experience
Yeah,
as an
yeah,
advisor.
that's what an advisor's for,
Yeah.
right? I mean, an advisor isn't somebody who knocks on your door every day and tells you what to do. They're just a resource that if you need them, you've got somebody you can turn to. If you're feeling anxious about a decision, you get a second opinion, so that can make you feel calmer. If there's an area you don't have expertise in, then they can either they have that experience or hopefully they've been around the block a few times. They know how to go about getting that experience. So
Yes.
yeah, that is a fun job because you feel like there are days where you feel like you've really made a big difference, and that's a wonderful feeling. Um,
I mean, right now, considering the market situation after 2021, the
mm,
Web3 industry, the advisors on Web3 became
mm,
so hyped and
mm,
popular that every second person will run at least one NFT marketing campaign, just
mhm.
immediately becoming an advisor without knowing all the whole knowledge, for example, as you do right
Yeah.
now, right? Based on your experience.
Well, the thing is, I do come from a technical background, so I know what's feasible and what isn't, and I know
Yes.
what looks like an easy problem but is a hard problem. Which is where people with a non-technical background fall down. But there are plenty of non-technical people out there who understand public relations or advertising or marketing, or who have network connections to people who have influence. So, I can't get a coin listed on an exchange, nor do I want to. If that's what you need, I'm not the person to talk to. However, what I can do is tell you, for example, that um, launching an offline digital currency is a very, very hard problem to solve, even if the European Central Bank claims they've solved it. I don't believe them, by the way. That's a difficult one, right? I can look at something and say, okay, your idea means that your engineers are going to have to solve the traveling salesman problem, and that's not been
Mhm.
adequately solved for what you're suggesting here. Try and think of something else. So I can come at it from a technical angle. Um, and I can go and look at new kind of proposed schemes. One that I spent a while on a while back was DAOs, right? Um,
Mhm.
DAOs are in principle really neat idea. In practice, they fall down for the same reason that we have problems with democracy. What's a fair voting system? And how do you get voters to vote and pay attention? Um, you know, the DAOs have the same problems that countries have in terms of people never feel that if the person you voted for doesn't get in, you feel cheated. Um, and a lot of what's the old joke where the journalist is asking a kid in the street, do you know why the electorate today is so apathetic and ignorant? And the kid says, "Oh, I don't know, and I don't care." Right.
Oh,
Um,
yes, yes.
So we have this problem with apathy in voting, and you see it even in DAOs. It's not it's not as engaging as it should be. And then the second problem is, what are you going to do? Go with a simple majority? Well, that becomes meaningless if only 2% of token holders are voting. It becomes meaningless if one person holds 51% of the tokens, right? So how are
All
you
right.
going to solve that? So that there's lots of like interesting problems there to solve, and people often come along and think, "Oh, I can do that. I can solve that." And sometimes they can, but you can't always do it just through enthusiasm.
For sure. Yeah. And in what ways do you believe that like blockchain technology, a part of what we just discussed about like voting system, can actually revolutionize industries like beyond finance or healthcare?
I think it's going to be a slow journey because, I mean, it took me personally 8 years before I finally thought that I understood the core purpose of blockchain. And every year I'd have an epiphany where I'd think, oh, now I get what the point is. And then next year, I'd be like, no, that was the naive view. And it's really amusing to watch other people go through the same journey too. So,
Yeah.
you know, Richard Kendall Brown was a guy that really opened my eyes. He was talking about how what blockchains offer is censorship resistance at their core. Right? Because you don't have a single entity in charge. It's not about cutting out the middlemen. It's not about reducing friction. It's not about getting rid of rent seekers or gatekeepers, toll roads. It's at its fundament. It's about censorship resistance. If I want to transact the Bitcoin that I have, then I can. The only way you can stop me is if you're a totalitarian government and you put me under house arrest and make sure I have no devices. And even then, you may not be able to get my Bitcoin off me, right? Unless you torture me. So that's about as censorship resistant as a technology as you can get. And if you compare that to something like social media, it makes social media look ridiculous, right? I got banned on LinkedIn twice in a week for using the word Bitcoin in a comment because of a misconfiguration.
Seriously?
Yeah, because of a misconfiguration in the AI. And I had a nice 1 hour chat with one of their product managers afterwards, and she even apologized to me. Someone had made a post about Bitcoin, and I commented, and I used the word Bitcoin, and I got banned. It got reinstated 24 hours later when they realized it was an error. And then, as a test, after a couple of days, I posted another comment with just the word Bitcoin, and I got banned again. And nobody else was being banned for using the word, just me. Um, and that's accidental censorship by a platform that's actually
Okay.
pretty kind and friendly, right? Um, when you move into other areas of the computer world, it can get really rather nasty. Financial institutions. I mean, I don't know if you've read about PayPal, right?
Oh yeah. Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
they regularly censor people's financial transactions and hold their funds hostage. I don't know if I've got it lying around at the desk. Yeah, I have one of these, a Flipper Zero. It's a little hacking tool designed to look like a game. It's got IR
Mhm.
and Wi-Fi and card readers, NFC and stuff like that. And yes, you can use it to do bad things, but you can also use it as an educational tool, and you can use it to prototype products and things like that. It's like a hammer, right? So
Yes.
you can use a hammer for good, hammering in nails. You can use a hammer for bad, hammering people's heads.
Yes.
Um, but PayPal took it on themselves to decide that this was a bad thing, and um, the fundraising that Flipper Zero had done on Kickstarter had gone through PayPal, and PayPal froze it. And I think it took them like a year to get it back, right? Now
Yeah.
that is extreme form of financial censorship, and it's amazing that the guys actually managed to get the device out there. They had to take loans against the eventual return of the money and things like that, I think. Um,
Mhm.
and you read about people who they want to use their credit card to buy something that is perfectly legal, but the credit card company decides that although it's legal, they think it's immoral, so they won't let them buy it. So from that perspective, cryptocurrency offers you a financial system where you do not have these institutions that can just arbitrarily cut you off from the banking system.
And
I,
at the same time, governments trying to get a control over the cryptocurrencies also.
yeah,
Like,
well, of course they are. That's kind of their role in life, right?
yeah.
Strangely enough, governments are full of people who want to lead, right?
Yes.
um, and people who want to lead usually have a worldview they want to impose. And fortunately,
Yeah.
in democracies, we get some level of choice as to which person we get to pick, and therefore which worldview we are going to allow to be imposed on
Allowed to.
ourselves. Um, but yeah, as a result, they are also very concerned about control. Sometimes I would say too much. So
Yes.
But of course, what one person thinks is oppressive control, another person thinks is perfectly justifiable sacrifice to make for safety and security. And we're endless, we're going to be debating to the end of time where exactly that should lie. I think it's
What
probably
are
not.
your thoughts about it? What are your thoughts? Do we need to have like? Does the government need to have like this some sense of control around the blockchain technologies?
It's a difficult question, and
Why
I'm
am I
found.
asking? Because very recently, like, I don't know if you noticed it or not, like X, also LinkedIn, got a lot of posts about and a lot of news about Trump going to back US dollar with Bitcoin.
Mm,
And they're gonna announce the new campaign to buy all the Bitcoin that is left in the market
uh-huh.
to bring such like a
Yeah, well,
reserve for
they can do that because they can print dollars, right? So,
yeah.
but I don't know. I don't read X very much. I mean, I accidentally left my browser open on a post about kids beating each other up in a classroom, and then the next time I came back to X, it just insisted on showing me lots and lots of videos of people getting into fistfights.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty pacifistic, so that wasn't good. And then I managed to eventually get it back to it's showing me stuff that I'm actually interested in. Um, but it's just, yeah, I I don't know what to make of what I read on there. It just most of what I see,
Mm.
it's just it seems to be so full of conspiracy theories,
Oh
and it just
yes.
and it's kind of it's pegged me as well. I'm a Bitcoiner and I'm a blockchainer, so I therefore will probably also think that pyramids were built by aliens and maybe the Earth is flat and
Yeah.
that the whole of the world is being run out of a pizzeria in New York. I mean, it's yeah, right. Today's foray into X, just my feed was full of posts about how Joe Biden is dead. Um, maybe he is, maybe he isn't. I don't know. But honestly, I don't
No one knows.
until it's reported properly. I don't really care, and that's why I don't like X because it just shows me hypotheses, um, and not particularly good ones at that. So, I have better things to do with my time than watch videos of whether Biden is wearing a rubber mask. Um, you know, maybe he is, maybe he isn't. Honestly, I don't care. I can't do anything about it anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But what about your thoughts about like total control from the government side?
Well, I mean, I live in Finland, which has got a fairly, the government is fairly strongly embedded into all aspects of life. If you want to buy a bottle of whiskey, you have to buy it off a government-owned shop. If you want to gamble on the slot machines, the money is going to the government because the government controls gambling in Finland. Um, it controls health care, social security, education. It's all, um, it's a very governmentally run country. On the other hand, I think it's the nicest country I've ever lived in because it seems to have a very egalitarian view. It's like every citizen is of equal value. It's not like these groups are. I mean, it's not perfect. Of course, there are groups that don't get as good a deal as others, but you get the impression that they're really trying to make sure that everybody gets the same shot at life. Um,
Hmm.
so, from that point of view, there's an example I think where government isn't that bad. Um, Coming from the UK, I always found government there to be a bit of a mess, to be honest. And now that I've left and I see it from the outside, it looks even worse. So, it's and when you read about things like that, you can't walk through London without your entire journey being filmed by security cameras. It's I feel a bit sad to think of a world like that. I don't want a world where everything I do in public is recorded from multiple angles. It's you know sounds like
Hmm.
the Truman Show. Um, so,
Unfortunately, yes.
but it's about balance, right? And again, we're back to the question: what is the right balance? Um, I I tend to confuse people because people who are libertarians seem to think I'm a socialist or maybe even a communist, and people who are very left wing think I'm a libertarian. So I think it just depends on each individual case. There's no blanket solution, and the reason
Yes.
why all these different ways of approaching governance in life have their followers and adherents is because they have an element of truth in them, but it's not the whole truth, and it's not a timeless truth. Um, so maybe it's my test engineering coming out. Everything breaks if you use it long enough, right?
Unfortunately.
Mm.
Well, for now, we have only Bitcoin that lasts for now. We
Well,
don't.
it's 15 years is good. Um, let's see what it looks like in 150 years. I think it has a possibility of still being around in 150 years, whereas I can pretty much guarantee that Google and Microsoft won't, right?
Yeah, I
Just
can
just
agree
look
with
at
that.
history of the longevity of companies. There's this wonderful story about how um, there's a guy from Google was at the Smithsonian and they were looking at scanning and storing books, and then the librarian was sort of saying, and what are we going to do after Google is gone? And the guy just did a double take. What do you mean when Google is gone? It's like, well, we have to think long term. Um,
Yes.
and when you look at human institutions, I think there's like a Japanese company that's been going 700 years, and you've got things like the Catholic Church and the University of Cambridge. When it comes to corporations, it's like very few of them last a century. So,
Unfortunately.
well, I think
Or
fortunately,
fortunately.
actually, I think it's
Yeah.
good that there's right. I mean, it's
Depends. Like, depends the situation, I guess.
well, it's. Do you want a world in which companies last forever? I mean, it's like doesn't give you a
No.
chance to reinvent anything, right?
Right.
And so eventually they just fade off, right? It's
Yes.
and then a new young blood comes up and tries to do it differently. It kind of mirrors humanity in that respect, right? I mean,
Right.
do we? It's one of the problems maybe of the modern world. There's just too many 80-year-olds ruling. Maybe we need to have some
Yeah.
50-year-olds having a shot, or 40-year-olds.
Oh, for sure. Especially after the crypto bubble. Like, there
Mm.
are so many um, young millionaires, even billionaires,
Yeah.
who just one day, one click, decided to become rulers, sort of the companies. And
Mm.
now we have what we have: tons of technologies. Most of them are not working properly, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And we have this problem that we hero worship the wealthy, right?
Yes.
Especially in America, where they just go, because this person managed to found a company that's now worth billions, they must know everything about everything.
Yeah,
Um,
you automatically becoming the most popular and accepted people
I suppose
worshiping.
it's one step better than when we go to movie stars and say, you played a physicist. What's your take on the nuclear bomb? And it's like, I'm an actor, right?
Yes,
Why are you
yes.
asking me? Well, so because you've been nominated for an Academy Award. When that's the kind of mess we have in society, is where we sort of we put these people on pedestals and then we forget what pedestal we put them on and why they're on that one, and we start asking them for advice on other things. And unfortunately, most people are, if you ask them for their opinion, um, they'll give it, regardless of um,
Doesn't
very
matter
few.
the level of proficiency
Yeah, very
at
few. I
all.
mean, I do the same, right? I'm doing it here, offering my opinions, and I'm giving opinions on things that I probably really shouldn't be. Um, but at least I recognize the irony of that. So,
Well, like, my next question is more about let's this popular word, let's say this way, mass adoption of the blockchain technology.
hmm
Um,
right.
yeah, one of the major barriers for mass adoption in the blockchain industry is this prevalence of scams and
hmm
rug pulls where people got instantly scammed every day, every minute, even now. Like,
mm
because of this new meme coin hype, where even right now, a lot of artists and pop stars also started to print their digital currencies and like getting a
Yeah.
huge amount of money. And because of these things, like the overall reputation of blockchain industry got reduced, like decreased, because people's first understanding, most of them, not all of them, the big part, because there was a recent study that shows that like about more than 300 million people or something
Yeah.
that actually are in the blockchain industry and knows the industry in some sort of way. Um, so how do you think the industry can address and overcome these challenges or fight against it, or like build a trust maybe to facilitate wider adoption?
Well, I would go one step back and ask the first question: why should everybody be adopting blockchain? Or should they all be adopting blockchain, right? I mean, this is people go, oh, we've got this problem with onboarding people from Web 2 into Web 3. And
True.
and then so that before you rush off and start asking why we can't get more people off Facebook and onto Discord channels to swap NFTs, it's you could ask, but why would we want to do that? Who is this relevant to? And that's where I find a lot of this onboarding stuff. It's just it's what I call fluff. It's not
Mhm.
it's not significant. Um, I'm perfectly happy for people to be doing that. I spent ages looking into NFTs, and then ultimately thought, well, they are just collectibles, and there are people who enjoy trading collectibles in the same way that there are people who enjoy trading Pokemon cards or baseball cards or
Yeah,
stamps, right? But this is not something that appeals to everybody, so we're not going to have. It would be bizarre if we had a future where 8 billion people were, trading images of frogs or monkeys on OpenSea.
for
Um,
sure.
so it really depends on the individual users again, and of course that doesn't mean you shouldn't be working out how to make the process as slick as and safe as possible for people who come into it new. But I think you also have to accept that 15 years is not very long, especially not for a technology that is uh, you know, potentially one of the most revolutionary we've seen.
Mhm.
It's still got to prove itself, but I happen to think it's a very, very big deal. It can make some foundational changes to the way we run society. Um, it's like discovering the Wild West or gold rushes in California or things like that, right? I mean, it's going to be dangerous. When you went out as a prospector in California or as a homesteader in the Midwest of the US before all the infrastructure was there, and you were taking a risk, and you had to accept that. And I think that there is that sort of, we're still in that stage with blockchain, and it's just a matter of the downside, of course, is that it's a lot easier to install a bit of software on your computer and start playing around and transferring some money in from your bank account and stuff. Whereas if you were off to stake out some land in uh, you know Iowa or something like that, then
Mhm.
you had to it took a lot more effort to get your act together to go and do it. So that's the downside. Um, and yes, we should be working on having um, it be a more secure setup, and that's what things like regulation should be about. This is where governments have the power to step in and say that is a scam. You're not allowed to be doing that. This is legitimate. This is a borderline thing. You need a license to show that you've considered this properly. Because, of
Mhm.
course, traditional finance is full of scams too,
For
right?
sure.
Um,
Right.
and But unfortunately, what I am seeing on the regulatory front is not so much about protecting the consumer as it is trying to maintain the authority of the incumbents. So making sure that, like
Yeah.
in the EU, the MICA legislation seems to be more about ensuring that you have to be a wealthy bank to play, rather than ensuring that people don't get scammed, and that's a pity.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
And Despite that, like, despite this whole quote unquote regulations from the government, where actually it's just a control thing and
Hmm.
trying to have as much control and as much authority as possible, even in the world of the blockchain.
Hmm.
Um, do you think that instead of like controlling the money, it's a good idea to make it more clear for nation-wise or the country-wise to have this, for example, the type of thing that can be used by the government to trace the transactions, analyze all withdrawals, transfers, but not be able to interfere with it. And in some sort of way, this will give them like a sense of control, and at the same time bringing the another level of regulation or something that can help, for example, countries to adopt actually the blockchain, to use it, for example, to buy a real estate, because in this case, like, you will have already licensed wallet IDs, wallet addresses that you can compare with the transactions, and etc. etc.
Well, you got a lot of things in there. It's not like one question.
Oh yes.
Um, and I'm not sure what the key thing you're asking is. So maybe you can you
Do
word it
you
all in
think
one?
it's
Can you word it in one sentence?
is it a good idea to give a government a tool which for which they will be able to trace all the transactions but not interfere?
Well, I guess that's kind of what blockchain is sort of doing in a way, right? I mean, with
Right.
Bitcoin, you can see exactly you can see which address is sending what to whom, and then with forensics, you can actually find out who the people
True.
are who are involved often. And this is where um, criminals are starting to realize that this is indelible evidence. And at some point, if they steal Bitcoin, at some point in the future, the evidence is just there on the chain. Once they're linked to an address, um, then it'll all just come tumbling down. It's probably the stupidest system to use for criminal payments, which is what makes it so funny when the anti-Bitcoiners say that, oh, it's used by criminals. Um, Real criminals use the existing banking systems, as shown by the fantastically high fines for money laundering and such like that the
Agree.
banks have received. Um, so yes, I think it could.
In a
The
way, let me justify it a bit. Like, yes, you're totally right about have we already have it, for example, for Bitcoin or any
mm,
other blockchain. We have the scanners where we can see all the transactions, transfers, but we don't know the real owner of the addresses.
no,
No.
and you
What
wouldn't
if
want to,
we
right? Because let's hypothetically speaking, let's say that there's an address out there which owns 100,000 bitcoins, and it gets linked to you. How long is it going to be before a gang turns up on your doorstep in the middle of the night trying to get the
couple of hours maybe?
right? Yeah, right. I mean, we've had over here. I've seen reports of those people in Sweden who've been targeted. See, so it's so from my perspective, it's not all bad that I didn't end up buying a huge hoard of Bitcoin. But, um,
You can always have a cold wallet out there.
yeah, it's anonymity is important to a degree, right? And I mean,
And
this is
at the
one of the
same
weird things
time,
about
yeah.
this is one of the weird things about Finland is all our tax records are publicly available. So if I want to find out how much my neighbor paid in taxes last year, I can just go and search that and find out.
Wow, I didn't know
Um,
about that.
and when I was working, I could go and see how much my boss earned, right? So, which has an interesting effect on society. For starters, it seems to squash the wage differences. You don't get these kind of CEOs who are earning 1,300 times the average wage of their workers. It also helps with preventing tax avoidance because if somebody sees their neighbor has reported that they earned 20,000 euros, but for some reason they are driving a brand new BMW and have a boat, they'll report to the tax authorities that something odd is going on there. Um, But yes, on the flip side, as somebody who didn't grow up here, I feel a bit uncomfortable about it. It feels like it's my private information, and why is it just being made
Yeah.
publicly available? Difference in culture.
However, this is the same thing that stops countries to push the adoption, to push the regulations, because they don't know how to create this perfect system for which they will be able to control everything and to give their
Well,
companies an access to the cryptocurrency.
I think with the central bank digital currencies, you can see that their eyes have been open to the fact that there are different ways of handling financial transactions. Right? It's uh,
Right?
it's kind of blockchain makes the legacy banking systems look a bit embarrassing in some ways. When when you get to the point that I have a client who pays me in USDC, and they're based in America, and it's not a huge amount. And if I was doing it through the banking system, then the wire transfer fees and the exchange fees would really eat up what they're paying me. But because they're doing it in uh, in crypto, in stable coins, they can make the payment in a matter of minutes, and I can then it's in the EU. I can get it off the exchange using a SEPA payment that's free, and the cost to him and to me is just a fraction of what it would be if we did it from his bank account to my bank account. Now, America's a particular problem with that. They still use checkbooks, for example. All right, so they're
Oh,
still
wow.
cashing, they're still paying things with paper checks. Um, that they haven't adopted the IBAN, international bank account number, um, and so there are actually some financial institutions that literally cannot pay me because I have a Finnish bank account number and I don't have a routing number and an account number. Um, so that's crazy. 2024, and an American bank and a Finnish bank can't make a payment without actually getting people on the telephone. So and talking
Yeah.
about it. Um, so in that sense, I think banking is learning that hey, this thing is here. The very least you can do is adopt some of the ways that it works, and it's the same with the central banks as they look at it and go, "Gosh, if we could actually, we've got these very crude levers for managing the economy,
Mhm.
right? We can set interest rates, we can print money, or we can sell more bonds, or we can buy back bonds, things like that. It's all, and then it has to trickle through you know the financial system to eventually, hopefully, influence the way that consumers act and affect the economy. And I think they see this as kind of wow, we could actually reach into the economy and start twiddling with knobs and dials and levers there that we've never had access to before. So of course that's going to be very tempting. Um, but then I'm not sure they've thought through the. Well, I don't think they're required to think through the political implications. It's up to our politicians to then say, no, whoa, hold on. Um, this goes completely against all these things that we guarantee our citizens. Um, which, but of course, that requires the politicians to have an understanding of what's going on, which I think a lot of them don't. You know,
Yeah, we'll need
too
another
many
call.
lawyers become politicians, and not enough doctors and teachers and
Even
engineers and
engineers,
yeah,
yes.
right. So it's a
I
bit
don't know.
in the
It's
UK anyway.
like,
it's a bit lawyer heavy. That's when
well,
so it's kind of
you're
that's the key
originally
part.
from UK or from United States?
Oh, I'm not from the United States at all. I'm culturally English,
Okay,
but I was born in Australia and I grew up in Holland.
I see. I see.
So it's complicated, as everything seems to be with me. I just seem to turn everything into a difficult thing.
Yet it's a great journey and interesting storytelling, right?
Yeah, well, I suppose, but there is that kind of living in interesting times aspect to it.
Yeah. I don't know how truthful is this information. I know that in United States, Coinbase and back in time Binance US and other centralized exchanges are giving the reports about their users to SEC
Hmm.
and Federal Tax Authority to like actually they're passing the KYC and they have this identified wallets, etc. So they're basically paying the taxes for what they earn from the crypto.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts about it?
Well, about companies giving information to the government.
Yes, centralized or decentralized exchanges. Now I know that now Uniswap is also in the talks to actually integrate the KYC system for EU.
Right. Well, I mean, that's always been the case, right?
Unfortunately,
And Facebook gives information to the NSA, Google does. It's, I think even the press kind of has sort of changed. The days of uh, Pulitzer Prize winning journalists digging into stuff, just because it's the role of the journalist. It's kind of all become very partisan. So, it's all kind of, we fall in this camp or that camp, and therefore we're going to promote all stories that benefit our party, and we're going to promote all the stories that make the other party look bad. I mean, you
hmm
can't. So these things are all very intricately tied together, and so I'm not surprised that exchanges are going to give information. And they're probably even legally required to, right? I think banks
yes.
on request, um, but it's got to be on request. It shouldn't be that they're just blasting, here, download the latest monthly CSV file with all the stuff in it. Um,
With all the details.
yeah, and then the question is, well, why don't we have the legal situation in place then? Like we have search warrants before the police can come into your house, for example.
Right.
Um, but I think when it comes to the tax authorities, the governments give them very, very wide remit to do what they like, right? It's kind of suddenly that kind of stuff goes out the window, and it's just because it is vitally important that every last penny of tax is collected from the average person. Um,
Especially average person. Especially average person. It's the most
yeah,
important thing.
I mean, I think I have nothing against taxation in principle, but I feel that the tax systems I see are not very fair, and that it seems, well, you can see it in the Finnish things actually, is that the wealthiest people in Finland are paying 30% tax, 33% tax, because they pay capital gains tax. And then you have the next tier down, and they are paying 58% tax because they're not rich enough to be able to afford to structure their finances in
Mhm.
a capital gains rather than a salary income manner.
Oh
And
wow.
then, yeah, so, and that just seems wrong to me, right? And I think it's pretty common across the Western world is that the very wealthy pay far less tax than the moderately wealthy. So why is that? Yeah. Anyway,
It's all about networking, I guess. You should know.
yeah, yeah, and just getting into the right club, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Uh, for example, like in Eastern, like in Middle East, and I'm
Hmm.
originally from Armenia, and in Armenia and Transcaucasian region also, there was zero
Right.
regulation going on around the crypto. It's still like a thing that is not. For example, for CIS, it's still something like newly discovered thing, and like
Hmm.
now in Middle East, there are tons of companies and agencies who are trying actually to build a regulation system, and
Hmm.
they still failed in some sort of way because we there
Right.
is nothing at the moment. But
Hmm.
everyone is trying to build something new around it. Like they're actively investing in actually the cryptocurrencies and blockchain technologies. Like
Right.
I don't know if you heard or not, but in United Arab Emirates, they even had a separated ministry and department for the blockchain technology and AI.
All right. I mean, I knew that there was a lot of interest in the Middle East concerning it, and but I mean, it's also AI and things like that, right? The
Yeah.
Middle East, they're realizing that they're not going to be able to coast on money from petrol, from oil forever, so they need to diversify.
Yes.
And then the question is what to diversify into, and well, it's not going to be crops or you know. So technology makes sense, right?
Indeed.
And
Yes.
but I mean, my knowledge of the Middle East is sketchy at best. I just see
I
what
see.
people say. I see what people say about it. You know, people are like,
Hmm.
and there certainly seem to be a lot of people in crypto who used to go off to Malta and now they're in, they're in Dubai. Um, there are these sort of places that seem to be popular.
Yep.
Um,
To avoid taxes and everything.
right? Yeah. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I've been to Egypt and Tunisia a few times. That's kind of the closest I would get to that. I've seen Saudi Arabia across the Gulf of Aqaba at night. There you go.
Oh wow.
But that's about it.
Are you planning to visit?
I was really thinking of seeing if I could take my middle son, who's really into architecture,
Mhm.
um, to Dubai because there's the was it the I can't remember the name of the huge tower now. What's the name of
Burj
that?
Khalifa?
That's the one. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I know he'd love to see that. Um, but I I don't like traveling, to be honest.
I see.
I've reached the age where it's kind of
Yeah.
just the getting to the airport and waiting and getting on the airplane and flying and getting off and and it's just I'd rather sit at home.
And do another research or invent
Well,
another
that's the thing. I mean,
interesting
the
gadget.
airplane's good for reading a book, right?
Oh yes, agreed.
But and but there's just so much, and the stress. Am I going to get there on time? Is my luggage going to be there? What if I lose my passport? What if what if, as happened to me when I went to Sharm el Sheikh, my bank card doesn't work, right?
Oh.
You get there and you put your card in the machine, you type in your PIN, and it says not recognized, and it eats the card, and you suddenly think, how am I going to pay for anything now? Right? And then you call your bank, and they say, oh yeah, you were. We thought you were in Finland, and suddenly we saw your card being used in Egypt, so we decided to inform the machine to eat it. Um, and next time, if you go on holiday, please tell your bank that you're going on holiday before you try to
Wow.
use your financial services there. And I'm like, this is crazy, really, you know. So I need to tell my neighbor so my plants get watered, and I need to tell my bank so you don't steal my card. Um, and then we had to get an emergency one couriered out, and then fortunately it was one of these all-inclusives, so at least we weren't going to starve or you know
Mhm.
be drinking tap water, which is not a good idea. But yeah, it was a lesson though, right? Whereas if I'd had a Bitcoin wallet on my phone, it would have been fine.
Completely other thing.
Mm, yeah.
By the way, what is the Ortoverse project? Can you tell me a bit more
Oh, right.
about it?
Is that mirrored for you, or is it the right way round?
Yes. No,
Yeah.
no,
So,
no. The Ortoverse is domed.
well, oh, this is a joke because the slogan
Okay.
for the Authorverse is "The Authorverse is doomed" with two O's.
Oh, okay.
This is the limited edition. The Authorverse is domed. Uh,
All right.
joke T-shirt. So that was there's this Corsican guy who lives in Thailand called Richard Piacentini, who's a software developer and CTO um, of in fact, I think CEO of software development agency in near Bangkok. And
Mhm.
me and him got to know each other because I came up with a way that I could issue an ERC20 token for every single address that exists or ever could exist on Ethereum.
Right.
Um, so this is like over 1 quindecillion um, tokens,
Mhm.
and it was just using a trick on based on the way that ledgers and in fact this thing in Solidity called a mapping works, which is Normally, if you call up your bank, and let's say you have a bank that will tell you the balance of anybody with them, right? Um,
Right.
there's a difference between having a person who has a bank account and has a balance of zero, and somebody who doesn't have a bank account. Those are two different things, right?
Right.
Um, but on Ethereum, they're actually the same thing, because there's this thing called a mapping, which maps an address to a balance, and for the
Okay.
token. And if you query an address to ask the balance, if it's not in the list, it returns zero. And if it is in the list, it returns the balance, which might be zero, but might also be a positive number. So I subverted that by making it return 100. If there's no balance, it returns 100. So that meant that everybody had 100 tokens, right? And then you could spend them. And then when you try to spend them, then it records, okay, you spent 10, so now you only have 90. So now you have a genuine balance, and it's 90. And then I had to use a trick for what happened if somebody spent all 100 and got their balance to zero. You need a way to store that is
Yes.
that is a genuine zero, not a not found zero. So that's the trick explained in a few sentences. And then Richard and I worked on making the same for NFTs. So now every Ethereum address has an Authorverse NFT, and I used um, generative art
Okay.
to create a unique image for each address based on the string of the address. You get a kind of a land. It's like pixelated 80s style
Mm-hmm.
um, picture of the land that you own, and then you can actually activate it, and then it appears in this metaverse that I coded up, which is a sort of a voxel world. And
All
you can
right.
walk around, you can visit your own land, and you are the only person who's allowed to build on your land. So unlike Minecraft, where you can go
Yes.
and destroy other people's stuff, um, you have a plot that belongs to just you, and you can build on it. And it was sort of really a hobby project to try to understand NFTs and try to
Mhm.
understand the metaverse. Um, that's how I learned about NFTs, is by giving everybody an NFT, making it the biggest airdrop ever, and then building a metaverse from scratch, so that I understood what was going on there.
And eventually ended up building the biggest metaverse source, so because you have
Well,
infinite amount of
we're
it.
actually limited it, so that there can only be 10,000. The first 10,000 NFTs that
All right.
are you have to sort of place it on the map. You have to say, I want to be involved. And
Uh-huh.
there's I think with the gas fees, what they are at the moment, it costs you like $1 or so. I could
Hmm.
check actually. Um, uh,
So all
Authorverse.
NFT addresses got a free airdrop of the
Yeah,
Ortaverse.
every Ethereum address has an NFT, but if you want yours to be visible in the Authorverse, then you have to go to the website and pay. At the moment, it is 0.00085 ETH
All right.
in US dollar, which is $2.97.
Yeah.
So as you can see, we're making a fortune off it. Yeah, it's about 2,000 people have revealed their land tokens in the Authorverse, and it's kind of not something that I'm really promoting very much these days, because it was part of trying to understand NFTs and metaverse, and it's what I do. If I
Hmm.
want to understand blockchain, I write a blockchain from scratch. If I want to understand the metaverse, I write a metaverse from scratch. And, well, not from scratch. It uses lots and lots of libraries
Yes, for
that other
sure.
people have provided, but I put it all together. And the same with the NFTs. It's like, if I want to understand NFTs, I want to do something unique with NFTs that nobody else has done, that shows that I've grasped how they function. Um,
Hmm.
and then you move on to the next thing.
And what is next for you?
Well, I sort of number of things that I'm working on, some of which I can talk about and some of which I can't. Um, but to to be honest, I'm not clear which ones I can talk about at the moment, so it's probably best to be quiet. And
So yeah,
I'm
let's
under a
skip
bunch of
it.
NDAs, and it's
Let's just skip it.
usually for recent things, it's better to be quiet.
Fair
But
enough.
and then at some point, one of them will say, "Oh yeah, can you talk about it now, please? Because we'd like the PR," and then I'll be able to talk about it. So, but
Fair enough.
it's the usual blockchainy stuff: smart contracts,
Okay.
wallets, uh, consensus protocols, things like that. Right? It's all the usual things. Um, and it continues to remain fun, despite the fact that I've now been working on this for a decade.
What has been one of your proudest moments in your blockchain career for this decade
Oh, proudest moment.
or
It would
achievement?
it would be publishing the book, right? I mean,
All right.
Move Over Brokers. It took me a year to write it, and I was up every night from about 9 or 10 p.m. when my wife went to bed till sometimes 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, sometimes with a whiskey beside me because it was so desperate. um, and, at the end of it, I've got this book. It's 80,000 words long, so it's a significant
Yeah.
piece of work. I had to learn self-publishing, design the cover myself. I used KDP, that's the Amazon Kindle Desktop Publishing. Work out how to promote it, how to price it. What price do you sell a book like that for? Advertise it on social media to get people to buy it, and uh, so it's really been. And now I'm gonna. I wonder if I can see it. Because I'm on the wrong computer, I can't. But I think I'm at nearly 2,000 copies sold, which
Oh
for a
wow.
self-published book is really good going. But what's more important to me is the feedback I get on it. And just people randomly nowadays, occasionally they'll post a picture on LinkedIn where they're like reading it or holding it and saying how much they enjoyed it and how educational they found it. And that's just wonderful to write a book where, I think we're up to 50 reviews now, but where people are just spontaneously writing a post on LinkedIn saying, I read this book over the weekend. It had been recommended to me by a friend for months. I finally got round to it. I read it in one sitting and absolutely loved it. It was funny. It was enlightening, and it was educational. And that to me, that that's the thing I think when I look back on in life, I'll be going, yeah, that that book was a key achievement.
Yeah, mine is still on the way. I'm still waiting for delivery.
You're thinking of a book to write, or you've written a book, or you're writing
uh,
a book.
no, I'm not writing right now. I'm thinking about it,
Uh
but
huh.
it's a very long journey. I was talking about your book. It's still in the delivery, and it's coming from US. So
Ah.
maybe
Oh.
within a
Okay.
week or something, I'll have it.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, it's difficult because I mean, maybe it would have been better if you'd ordered it from the German Amazon site, because then it comes from Poland, right?
Yeah.
But Amazon's a nightmare in that respect. I had this company idea actually because I would like say, here's my book, Amazon.com slash, you know, um, item number, and people say I can't buy it, and then like, what do you mean? And then it's like, oh yeah, but you're in France, you need to go to Amazon.France,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And so I thought, oh, I can make a dynamic link, and I'd actually written the code, and I was looking into how I was going to advertise. Then I found a company who'd already done it, so now I use them. To I didn't think it was worth competing with them. Maybe it would have been. I think I was too conservative back then, where I would go, well, if someone's already done it, I won't do it. Whereas now, maybe I'd say, well, someone's already done it, I'll do it better if I can.
It's a
But yeah,
good like way of thinking.
yeah. Well, I
Eventually.
mean, it's like being based in Finland, I have to get the stuff from the German Amazon. That's the cheapest.
Oh, I
And
see.
I think there's definitely scope in fixing the little mistakes that the big companies make. And the risk there, of course, is that they'll then do it themselves. So, I mean, this is a problem we have with these behemoth platforms like Amazon and Microsoft and Google and Apple, which is if you write an app, and let's say you notice there's a gap in the market, we need an app that we can stick on phones to track our teenagers so that if they get in trouble, we know where they are. So you write an app and it's really doing well and you're selling lots of them. And then one day you wake up and find out that Google's gone and included it in its product suite as a default thing, and they've called it Family Link. Now suddenly your business is blown out of the water. And I think that's and the big companies when they recognize that a small company is up and coming, we'd like to think they would buy them, but they don't always. Sometimes they just crush them. Same with Amazon noticing that you're making a product that lots of people are buying, then they release it as an Amazon Basic product for $1
Yeah.
less, and promote it more on their platform, right? Because it's their platform, and suddenly you're gone from being the number one supplier of widgets, and now you're not making any sales anymore because Amazon's getting them all. And we're supposed to have these antitrust cases and the anti-monopoly legislation to prevent it happening, but it's not really working, I think.
Because at the end of the day, all like if you're an Amazon or other giga company, you have shares, you're doing a lot of charity organization funding and all this type of thing, and
And
eventually
you're
a lot of
donating to
stuff
political
gonna drop.
parties, both
For
of them.
sure. Yes.
Yeah,
And eventually a lot of charges just drop off because they're expired or something.
yeah,
It's a classical story.
yeah.
For now, I noticed two, let's say, two new technologies around the blockchain that
hmm
got a very huge hype
hmm
around the influencers. One is DPIN,
hmm
Decentralized Physical Infrastructure Network, and the second one is RWA, Real World Assets.
Yeah,
There are like a lot of people talking that like for next bull run and the next run there will be these two aspects that will eventually start it or push it to beyond the limits and the all-time highs, etc., etc.
right.
Can you explain the meaning of these technologies and share a bit your thoughts about it?
Well, they're not really new, the concept. I mean, like helium, for example, is an example of a DPIN, right? Where you're incentivizing people to run devices to produce a network that is not run by telecoms companies. Um, so, and again, real world assets. I mean, people have been talking about having digital assets linked to physical assets. Um, stick RFID tags in the physical things, or bottles of whiskey, bottles of wine that are tracked on the blockchain, and you know that you're not getting a fake. Same with luxury goods and stuff like that. To me, it sounds like the same stuff coming around again, and this time it's not the big companies, because it's sort of back in 2016, 2017, when this was sort of coming up as potentially interesting. It was the supply chain companies and things like that that were interested in it. I think now we've got enough of a kind of network and infrastructure out there that people can feel they can go it as entrepreneurs, not need to get a big company on board to get this to work.
Right.
But to be honest, nothing's jumped out as kind of, yeah, this is really worth having a look at. I think it's still very much at the kind of, how to describe it. They're excited about it. They haven't yet learned the mistakes that we made the first time round 8 years ago. And now we're coming at a second shot, and hopefully there's enough wider awareness of what's going on that maybe it'll make more of an impact this time, where people are actually thinking in terms of, well, how do you have to legally structure it to tie a real world asset to a blockchain? What kind of, maybe it'll be a bit less naive this time round, because of course you can't, it you can't take a physical object and somehow inextricably tie it to a thing in a digital network, right? I mean, it's sort of, there has to be the take a property registry, for example, right? Governments have a list of all their land and their territory, and it's parceled up, and it has owners, and the land has rights, and it's all in a database. But the land is not in the database. The land is just the land. The database is our interpretation of what is allowed to be done with the land, and how could you tie those two things together? You can't, right? The land is not on the blockchain. The land is not in the database. So you have to come up with techniques that reduce the chance of something nefarious going on, someone decoupling the real world asset from the token that represents it. And as far as I'm concerned, we're still stuck with the law for that. That ultimately it's like you have to have a company that you can sue if they don't do what they say they are doing. In the same way, in a sense, like if someone says these tokens represent gold and we have gold in a vault, well, somebody needs to audit the gold. If someone says these tokens represent apartments in an apartment block, well, there needs to be a contract to say the person who owns this token owns this apartment. And this has been discussed. I think the first time I saw this discussed was like 2015 or something like that.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, so it's but we've got a new generation of people interested in it. Maybe they'll come up with something that we didn't the first time round. Maybe it's a more important problem to be solved at this point, because the other things are kind of starting to bed down. Who knows? But I agree. I see Deepin is the particular one that I see a lot of kind of popping up with. They're telling me that it's going to be some big number of dollars a year industry. When it happens, then I'll be interested.
After. It's the same way it's
Well, as
happened
it
for
goes
Ethereum.
along. Yeah. Well, I keep an eye on it, but I'm not gonna. In hindsight, I put too much time into NFTs and the metaverse, for example, right?
Yes,
So,
I see.
although
Yeah, I
it
see
was
your
fun,
point.
right? And I'm glad that it's out there as a monument to my stupidity. But it's it wasn't a good financial decision. It was a good educational decision. And then now I know a lot more about how sandbox games work and how 3D
Yeah,
rendering works and stuff like that. So with these kind of things, yeah, I could throw myself into it, but it's you got to keep the options open. I mean, one of the things I do, for example, I have here on my desk. You see, uh, these kind of things. Those are
yes,
little microcontrollers, ESP32 chips. So, like, I'm interested in them because they're getting really, really cheap and they're getting really power efficient. So that at some point you'll be able to put them in, you know, well, maybe one day in a can, right, in the bottom of a can.
right.
Could get that cheap. I've got loads of RFID stickers, right? I keep an interest in these things because I think these are pieces that eventually they're going to be good enough to solve all sorts of problems that they don't solve at the moment. Um, but I'm not going to spend a month learning all the ins and outs. I just want to make sure that I
Sure.
can handle them well enough and maybe do something fun with them. And then they're there in my tool chest for if at some point in the future it becomes important to have a device tied to a blockchain that's kind of DRM'd or proprietary. I know how to do it.
I see.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you spend about a month on NFTs and metaverses.
No. I spent like, well, the NFT part I think was about a month, and the
Okay.
writing the voxel world stuff. I mean, that probably, well, that was ongoing as a kind of hobby. Because I'd finished my book, so I had all those evenings spare, right? Um, so that was just me in the evenings with nothing better to do. Um, and it's sort of I had a rather empty client list at that point because it was kind of coming out of the bull run and into the bear market. Um, to just write it, and I had this idea that I could write a book about it as well. But it would have had a better ending if metaverses and NFTs were like still a very big thing. Maybe on the next cycle.
But in your opinion, what do you think was actual the cause of diminishing the NFT market because it was very quickly, and it's like
Mm.
right now we're in a very bad situation,
Well, if you think of them purely from an artistic point of view,
right?
right, then you had CryptoPunks being the first, right?
Yes, right.
Um, and then from that point onwards, there wasn't really much of significance. And a lot of it kind of got channeled into the same kind of stuff. So it's just, yeah, we're going to make a lot of headshots, and there'll be
Hmm.
monkeys, or there'll be zombies, or they will be, cartoon characters or something like that. It's like, um, there's not really a big market for that, but people got very excited over it. I mean, that was a kind of a mania. Um, and really, it wasn't sustainable because every man and his dog and every person I knew who was even vaguely scammy was issuing 10,000 PFPs, right? Because you could do it very cheaply.
Yes.
And it's just the market got completely flooded, and then a few people were good at PR and managed to. So it became a bit like modern art, right?
Hmm.
Where you have to be with the in crowd to be successful. um, if you're not, it's as much about networking and your position as it is about the art that you're doing. And there has to be something reasonably good to it, whether it's a good story or good artwork, or usually it's the good story. Yeah, and then it just gets to a point where it's like, well, it's completely,
What's next?
yeah, it's completely overloaded. There's no
Yeah.
scarcity. There's nothing. None of these were really that different from each other, and the NFT was just a way of saying I submitted some money to this pool of artists,
Hmm.
right? Except they weren't even artists mostly; they were just entrepreneurs paying artists.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I have a couple of dead fellas. I don't have a CryptoPunk because I can't afford them even now. Um, I got the dead fellas because I thought that, well, there was the Australian connection, and I thought it was kind of
Hmm.
early on and fun. But I didn't, and I've got a few other random smatterings of some NFTs, but I didn't buy any of them thinking I was going to get rich. Though actually, there was one that I bought was the Sandbox Land token,
All right.
which was a complete waste of time because it turned out that I then was expected to buy. I thought it would give me access to building my sandbox land, but it didn't. You had to get into the alpha sandbox land building. You had to buy another token. And then I thought, hang on a
But
minute, Sebastian Bourget. So it's like basically you are fleecing me again and again and again. Every time I think I've bought the token that gives me access to what it is you're saying you're offering, which seems to be taking a long time to come along, you're making me shell out for another one. So that project I'm really still to this day very angry about. It feels like it was a con.
oh,
Um,
it is. It's
yeah.
like a perfect in-game monetization strategy,
Yeah,
putting it
yeah,
on
the
the
kind
video
that is
game
banned,
industry.
the kind that is banned for phone games in the EU
Yes.
now, but
Yeah.
they haven't got round to banning it for. So that was very disappointing. And I'm not expecting to get the money back from that. So,
I was stupid enough to sold my CryptoPunk in a very cheap
ah,
way.
you had a CryptoPunk, right?
Yes.
I see.
And
I didn't even bother to get one, right?
I mean,
I mean,
I
I got
was
I
so
got
embarrassed. I was so embarrassed when I saw the pricing, and I was like, "What the hell did I do
oh
for
god, yeah.
myself?"
The one day had like 80 ether at one point,
No, they were even more. There were at some point they were even a couple of hundred each.
right? And
They
what did you
are,
you sold just for two?
yeah, something like that.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's this world for you, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
I didn't count everything, so
yeah. I mean, I know a guy who sold 10,000 Bitcoin to buy an apartment in Helsinki, right?
no way.
Yeah, but the thing is that at that point, it was like he was just really pleased because he'd mined them,
Yeah,
and then they were worth something, right? And then they were like worth so 80 euros or something like that. And
yeah.
so it's like I can sell this, pay the taxes, and get myself a really nice apartment in the center of
Apartment.
town.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, anybody who had Bitcoin early on and didn't just lock them away because all the hodling stuff is later. Of
Yes.
course, it was very tempting. This was worth nothing. Now it's worth a significant sum of money. You didn't realize that it was going to one day be worth an absolutely
Even more. Yes.
life-changing. Plus, if who knew if he'd held on to it, maybe his wallet would have been hacked the next month, and
You
he
never
just
know.
yeah,
That-
exactly. So I think as long as you got something out of it, then you've won.
yeah, at least something. Yes. Yes,
Yeah, I
agreed.
mean, you can't sit on them forever.
Uh,
It's meant to be a form of cash, right?
yeah.
At some
Yeah.
at some point, you should spend it.
Yeah. But I'm trying to control myself as much as possible right now. Like I have a bunch of airdrops, and I'm trying to not to even think about it. Like just like,
Hmm.
transfer to the cold wallet, leave
And
it
leave
in.
it there. Visit
Yeah,
it
leave
again in
it
10 years' time.
there. Yeah,
Oh, I'm
something
sorry
like
to
that.
hear about your CryptoPunk, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, as I said, I didn't even bother claiming one. I just kind of, when they came out, I just looked at them and thought, nah, it's just blocky. What are
Yeah,
they,
and it
28 by
was very
28
shit.
pixels?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, what's this all about?
Yeah.
Um,
Do you have
so,
any thoughts like what should happen for the NFT market to like actually that it would give them a second life, a second chance?
I think the open seas looks rares type thing, mintable, that kind of just collectible. It's it'll hang around as a niche activity. People just sort of think it's fun to collect or trade them, right? But I don't think it's gonna ever go back to being a big deal. Um, NFTs have other use cases,
Mhm.
um, and but they're not as kind of flamboyant and fun, right? I mean, using NFTs to represent apartments in an apartment block is not,
Yeah.
it's a perfectly valid business case, but it's not. No one's going to get excited about it. Cointelegraph is not going to write an article about it. They
Yeah.
would have 8 years ago, not now. So yeah, maybe you have an apartment block and it's run by a DAO. Oh, there goes. That was close. Um, it's run by a DAO that handles the finances that people pay in because they own the apartments, and you have an NFT that shows your ownership of the apartment. Blah blah
Hmm.
blah. You could build something like that, right? And then it's semi-autonomous. You probably still want some kind of human oversight. So there's a role where an NFT might play, because each apartment is different, right? It's
Right.
apartments in an apartment block are non-fungible. The higher ones have better views. The corner ones have more windows. The center ones
Traits.
have a lower heating
Metadata
bill, right?
traits.
Yeah. So and then the NFT can keep track of stuff like maybe who owned it, maybe um, stuff about repairs that were done, and problems there were and things like that. So you have a complete history. That's one
Mhm.
possible use, right? But um, but
We
yeah,
also
it's
have
not.
soulbound tokens.
Mhm.
The new stuff that was promoted initially as a use case for universities to actually mint the diplomas for the students.
Yeah, and driving licenses, things that are
Yeah.
tied to an individual, or they could be tied to a property, right?
Yeah. Right.
I mean, it's just something that can't be transferred from one house to another, something that can't
Mhm.
be transferred from one person to another. Maybe it's a thing where it's a license, right? I've bought a
Right.
game, I'm allowed to play it, my kids are not, so it's
Mhm.
my license token is soulbound, that kind of thing.
Correct me if I'm wrong. The whole idea of soulbound tokens is like you cannot transfer it because if you try to transfer it, got burned, right?
But no, I think it just the idea of a soulbound token is that the owner of the token can't transfer it. The issuer might
So,
or might not be able to destroy it, depending on the use case. So, for example, a university diploma should be. I'm a university. You've just graduated from um, my course, and you're getting
yes.
your degree. I can now represent your degree as I could do it as an NFT,
All
but if
right.
you can transfer it, then you
It makes
could give
zero
your degree
sense.
to you could give it to your brother, and then he could apply for jobs saying I've got a degree from the University of
Yes.
Keir. Um, so what I do is I make it soulbound. So it has all the properties of an NFT, metadata, I can check who the owner is, stuff like that. But the one thing is you can't transfer it. And me as the university, I need to have the opportunity to burn it if it turns out that it comes to light that you plagiarized your thesis, right?
Hmm.
And then I may, there are cases where degrees are revoked. So as the university, I may have the option of burning it, even though it's sitting in your wallet. It may be transferable with my permission. You may say, look, this is my new wallet address. I go, okay, prove it. Great. Right. Now I'll transfer it for you.
I
So,
see.
right. But the fundamental thing is that it's meant to stick to the owner rather than
Hmm.
be transferable. And I think when Vitalik was talking about it, it was sort of like you might have a game where you are able to buy game assets and you might represent them as NFTs, but you might have some assets that you don't give people permission to sell on. So
Right.
you might say these assets you can sell on a marketplace, but these ones are just tied to your character, and you're not allowed to sell them on. A paladin
Mhm.
gets a magic sword, and it's a holy sword, so of course he's not supposed to sell it because he's a holy knight.
Yeah,
They don't they, they
something
don't
like
kind of
this.
they don't go, oh, I'm going to sell my magic sword that I was given by the Brotherhood of Paladins and Crusaders, and you know. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah.
I have one personal question. Do you
Mm.
play video games with your children?
And not as much as I used to.
All
When
right.
Fortnite first came out, I used to play games with them. Um, and these days, they've all got into chess for some reason.
Oh,
So we're playing
interesting.
chess, and that includes playing on chess.com because then we can
All right.
analyze the games afterwards.
Mhm.
But I don't play video games as much as I used to. I sort of um, I think the last time I really played them in earnest was before the kids came along, actually. Um, so and then once you've got kids, then it's
How long it was? 10, 20 years ago?
well, my oldest is 18; she's left home
Oh,
now, and my youngest pair are 8. So
uh-huh.
so yeah, I've been parenting for 18 years, and I've got at least another 10, if not 12, left, depending on how mature they all are.
Yeah. Yeah. And how did you manage to combine parenting, your inventions, a couple of works, different places, plus this whole new educational material that you're taking and educating yourself to create something new? Is it hard to actually combine all these type of things?
Well, sometimes when my wife gives me too many chores around the house, it's a bit overwhelming when she sort of gives me, and I suddenly see I've got this list of, oh God, that light bulb to change, and I've got to fix that leak in that pipe, and there's all the weeding in the garden to do and stuff. And
Right.
um, but with kids, I mean, to me, it felt natural. It's just what you do as a parent, right? Um, I mean, to be honest, I was thinking about this the other day. There's those, I used to do the night shifts, like
Hmm.
so my wife could sleep at night, and I would then have a nap um, after sort of from 6 o'clock onwards. um, I used to love that sort of 2-3 o'clock in the morning period when you're with the baby, and sometimes they're awake, sometimes they're not, and it's just like feels like there's just the two of you. But I know other parents who think it's horrible to have to go through that, right? So I think it's down to the individual. So no, I didn't find parenting a chore. It
Hmm.
just felt like a natural thing that I should be doing. So I'm lucky there, I guess. And I did my, half the nappy changes and half the bottle feeds, and I was thoroughly involved in the early days.
Yeah.
Um, and now they've got to the age where, yeah, they're perfectly happy going off and playing by themselves. The youngest, the 8-year-olds, and because I got two sets of twins,
Hmm.
8, and 2 of them are 10. They're still at the age where if I suggest we do something together, they're delighted. But once they get past like 11 or 12, the last thing they want to do is hang out with their dad. So I'll have plenty of time in the future to catch up on fun things. I started playing guitar again for the first time in 15 years, for example, because now I have more time.
How does it feel?
It's life, just is what it is, right?
Yeah,
Like I look in the mirror, I've got a lot of grey hair. 20 years ago, I didn't, right? That's the way it goes.
it is.
Right? Time flies like an arrow.
Well, unfortunately, yeah.
Mm.
Sometimes I even catch myself like, oh God, like it's already 2, 3 months past after like there's something that I said I will do tomorrow, and I was like, oh shit.
Oh, the main thing, beat yourself up too much about what you don't do because, in 1,000 years' time, it won't really matter whether you did it or not.
Yeah,
Right? So, and then eventually it's all going to be gone anyway. So it's more about, do I need to? Is it important? Is it valuable to me? Do I have a duty to? Right? That's how I make the call. Um, I mean, my one problem is I say yes to people too easily. So if someone gives me a good story and I kind of feel like they're doing something, but I want to help them, and I have to sort of learn to say, well, actually, I'd love to put time into your thing, but I don't have it.
right.
That's what I find hard. And then you have to turn around after a month and say, well, actually, I've not been putting in the time that I said I would. I'm sorry, I'll have to withdraw.
Yeah,
Um, right. And then I always feel really bad. But generally speaking, it's pretty clear what I want to be doing, what I should be doing, and what I need to be doing. And then you just make a list and work through it that way, and give yourself some flexibility. Right. Some days I wake up and I'm feeling really creative, and I go and write an article. Other days I wake up and I'm feeling really inspired, and I invent something. And the key is to capture. Oh, this feels like it's going to be a good writing day, and then I
yeah,
write. But you have to occasionally come back and ask yourself, well, why haven't I had a good writing day in 2 weeks? Right? And then you find that there's an underlying thing like, oh, it's because I started this article and it's got stuck and I don't know how to fix it, or I'm writing this white paper and there's a bit that I don't understand, and I've just put it aside because I've hit a bump, and
yeah,
now I need to go and actually do the unpleasant job of getting over that bump so I get my enthusiasm back.
yeah. It
And
is.
the main thing, be enthusiastic about stuff, right? And you can find something good in pretty much everything. I mean, once I was on a train from Cambridge to Edinburgh, and I didn't. This was before smartphones and tablets and Kindles, and I didn't have a book with me. So all I had was a notepad and a pen. So I looked out the window and I started creating passwords by looking at number plates and taking the first letter and first digit of them and writing them down. And I think I wrote down like 30 or so of these 12 character passwords for the first half of the trip. And then I spent the rest of the trip memorizing them. Um, and
Wow.
well, I had nothing else to do. I could have just spent the whole time staring out the window. I thought, let's do something different. And as a result, I had like 30 passwords that I'd memorized with some time that I had nothing else useful to do with. And they were really useful for my online banking and stuff like that. They all eventually got compromised by data breaches, but you know. So I mean, and it was really useful on a bunch of levels. Firstly, it gave me a whole list of passwords, um, and secondly, it made for a great anecdote in my book, which
Yeah.
was not what I expected when I was doing it, because I was just doing it out of sheer boredom and thinking, well, if I'm going to be bored,
Right.
let's do something useful. I feel like doing something useful. This looks like it's boring but useful. I'll do that rather than just looking out the window, which is also boring but less useful.
Yeah, it is. It is. Um, um, I remember someone asked on our promotional post on LinkedIn to ask you about garlic and unicorns.
Oh, right. Well, we'll make that the last question then, right? Okay.
Okay.
So the garlic comes from the Authorverse,
Right.
and the Authorverse voxel world. I built this using an open source rewrite of Minecraft called Flying Squid. And I had to change, so that was because that's a complete rewrite in JavaScript from the ground up. It's not breaching the copyright of Mojang's
Right.
code.
Yes.
What they had done is they had used all the graphics from Minecraft, and that is a breach of copyright because the art, this is what dirt looks like, this is what grass looks like, this is what a squid looks like, is copyright, right? So they shouldn't have done that. So I had to change all that, and one of the things I had to change was the monsters that they had. So I took the title screen had these revolving squid, which were just copies of the Minecraft squid and therefore couldn't be used. So I made the simplest possible thing to replace them, which was a cube with a smaller cube, purplish and then turning to white, very easy to implement, and looked like garlic.
Right.
And it was kind of created by accident. So that's where the garlic thing came on. And then people in the Authorverse were jokingly splitting themselves into Camp Garlic and Camp Onion. And so garlic just became this sort of running joke connected with me. I do
see.
actually happen to like the taste of garlic. And then LinkedIn kept asking me to contribute to their knowledge base articles.
Right.
And they give you this little gold badge,
Yes.
community top voice, and you get to keep it for 5 weeks for answering a question. But they're gathering this data for AI training, right? So they auto-generate the articles with AI, then they get human beings to write replies, which you in the terms have agreed can now be used for AI training. And now it's a way for them to train a business-oriented AI LLM. And I don't really like that because I find that rather sneaky. Because you're not getting anything permanent from it. You're not getting anything of any real value, and you're giving all this knowledge that you have gathered through your experience. So I just decided to start answering them flippantly with humor. And I always put a reference to garlic and unicorns because the thing I had just read before I answered the first post was an issue about how Europe doesn't have any unicorns. Big companies worth $1 billion, right?
Yes.
So I thought, well, that sounds like a businessy type thing then, doesn't it? The AI is not immediately going to flag it. And that's why every community, I only answer the articles when LinkedIn specifically invites me to. So I'm not going in there and spamming them. They are requesting that I write my answer. And my answer always contains a reference to garlic and unicorns so that hopefully at some point in the future, people will wonder why this Microsoft business AI has this obsession with garlic and unicorns.
And onions, unicorns, yes. Super interesting. Well, Keir, thank you so much for your time. It was super interesting and super inspiring for me personally also.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's been really fun to be here. I have to go now. I got to get cracking on dinner for the kids. But wonderful to talk to you, Aman. Good luck editing it.
Pleasure is mine.
And when